Today, the authors of the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, Elisa Spungen Bildner and Robert Bildner, who have lived in the Berkshires for 35 years and are loyal Northshire customers. So please join us for this great event. And we are going to be recording this event, as Rachel did, but don't worry, only the people who are speaking in the little yellow box and unmuted will be recorded. So Rob, Elisa, tell us about the book.
Great. So we'll take it away. Yes, we are really honored to be here. We are big fans of Northshire bookstore.
We were talking about it right before we all started. So you should all be great fans too. Okay, so why don't you start with the video, Rob?
Well,
okay,
go ahead. Oh, listen, I think you want to.
Yeah, so we'd like to introduce you to some of the farmers and the chefs we interviewed in this cookbook by showing a really short 2-minute video, and it gives you a little context about the project. And I'm also going to mention that we're really honored in December when our cookbook was named New England Cookbook of the Year by the Readable Feast, which is a group of prominent writers, chefs, and academics in the Northeast. So Rob, video?
Yeah, so I'm going to share a little, we call it a virtual tour of our book, if you bear with me, and apologize for not the smoothest transition here, but here we go.
In our new book, the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, you'll meet some of the remarkable farmers and chefs who play a heroic role in preserving the agricultural community of the area. That is, the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts and neighboring New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. We tell the stories of 42 of them with personal profiles, striking photographs, and 125 kitchen-tested recipes highlighting fresh ingredients, all inspired by or created by these farmers and chefs. The story this book tells, and the recipes, offer a picture of small family farms that go well beyond this region. This area is a special place, attracting visitors from across the country. It's known for its homegrown food and farm-to-table tradition, as well as its world-class scenery and culture. The mission of our book, the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, is to highlight the people, places, and things that make this region so special, and the story of small family farms. The dedicated farmers and farm-to-table chefs we write about are committed to producing food that is tastier and healthier than what's often found in the supermarket by maintaining healthy soil and farming and producing food sustainably. And, as importantly, the meat farmers we interviewed are consistently concerned with treating their animals humanely.
It's tough to do this work. The farmers we interviewed are motivated to farm for environmental, social, political, health, lifestyle, and even spiritual reasons, often sacrificing a comfortable living for their values. Who could foresee when we began our journey 4 years ago to write the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook that its mission to inspire consumers to buy local would be more important than ever when it came out in May 2020. During this time and beyond, we need to support these hardworking and principled people. Our book, website, and Facebook page suggest ways you can buy their products even now. I'm Rob Bildner.
And I'm Elisa Spungen Bildner.
Our new cookbook, the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, sheds light on the farmers and the farms of the Berkshires of Western Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York. Thanks so much. So I should also note that the farmers, our book also includes farmers from Vermont, and we'll talk about them. I'd like to add that Berkshire celebrity chef Brian Alberg, who currently owns the Break Room at Greylock Works in North Adams, created most of the recipes in our book inspired by what the farmers grow or raise. And while this is a book focused on the Berkshires, Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, the message and the recipes are universal and not dependent on geography. So first, a little background about us that goes beyond the video. We have been part-time residents of the Berkshires for 35 plus years. While we both trained as lawyers, most of our professional career has been in the food business. I'm third generation. My grandparents founded a supermarket chain in New Jersey, King's Supermarkets, and I ran 2 food companies that distributed fresh produce and specialty foods and helped farmers bring their products to market. Our son, Rafi, who graduated from the Cordon Bleu before going to college at Yale, is a master artisanal pizza chef operating under the brand name Hilltown Hot Pies. And his brother Ari ran a craft brewery and consults in the wine business, comprising the 4th generation. After we sold our companies, I studied photography. I photographed the farms, farmers, and chefs in the book. Elisa, a former journalist and journalism professor and a trained chef with a master's in nutrition, ran another one of our companies that produced value-added produce.
So Rob didn't mention, but I actually got my start in the food business growing up in Chicago, where I was a bagger at the Chicago area grocery stores. Again, we'll discuss the cookbook in a second, but I wanted to just a short check-in among all of us about our current food buying habits. And I know that we're not running into stores, but if you can, just raise your hand and I'll be able to see you. That would be really helpful. So first question, when you shop for food normally, or even now, if you have a choice, do you specifically look for organic? So raise your hand if that includes you. This is great. I know I'm talking to Vermont and upstate New York people, of course. How about food that's, if not certified organic, food that's designated local? Raise your hand if that's extremely important to you. I love it. And finally, sustainable, which is not a specific designation, but an idea. Got that too? Great. I truly love this. So we're on the same page, and I've been an organic shopper forever. My hand was up on that one. But our son, Rafi, would argue with me for years that you buy local first, and then particularly local and sustainable, and then certified organic. And that's really where I've come out as well. And happy to talk further about these designations later. We can do the Q&A, whatever. And you'll see why, for me, buying local and sustainable absolutely trumps everything else. I'm also going to mention that I've spent the day actually talking to a bunch of farmers, so I'm happy to update at the end a lot of our profiles in the book about how the farmers have fared this particular season and what they're thinking about going into the spring. So our cookbook's goal is to help readers create great foods, but its other objective is to really show why we should all be buying and eating locally grown and raised food. Again, wherever you are, and to urge everybody to know, no matter what you're buying, where your food is from. Who's making it and how it's made, especially when you're not buying local too. To give you a flavor for the book, Rob and I, as mentioned in the video, are going to tell a bunch of stories about farmers we've profiled, and this will give you more insight into why it's so important to buy local and sustainable, and certified organic as well, and why you should support, our local farms that surround us. And we're really lucky where we live that we have this option, and we certainly have it now as well. Quick note on how we ended up writing this book. We were inspired to jump into this project when Rafi, who's the youngest of our 4 kids, we've talked about him, started gardening our Beckett, Massachusetts backyard each summer. He'd sell his produce in front of our house on a little, table, whatever, with an on your honor cash box. And then he went for semester to the mountain school in Northshire, Vermont, which is a working organic farm that teaches high school juniors how to farm. So the following 2 summers, he came back to Beckett and transformed his garden into October Mountain Farm, which was an intensively cultivated and sustainable half-acre spread of lettuce, tomatoes, and frankly, more exotic veggies. And he sold them all over the area at farmers markets. And we used to visit Rafi at these markets, and we'd marvel at his, red rush kale and his, whatever, green beans, whatever he was selling. But we were incredibly aware as his parents of the long hours and the grueling work it took to get those products to his customers. On Friday nights, we're sitting down for dinner. He was working through the night, harvesting his crops, washing and processing them to get them ready to sell at the all-important Saturday farmers market. And occasionally he was lucky and a friend of his would help. And I remember one friend who was absolutely exhausted after like a couple days, semi-jokingly asked Rafi if under union rules he could get a break.
At these markets, we met local farmers, and we're moved by their stories of how they came to farm, their challenges, their commitment to the soil, to the environment, to producing clean, healthy food, and of course, food that tastes good. As one farmer we interviewed, Amelia Conklin of Skyview Farm in Sheffield, Mass, put it, quote, Anybody that's eaten a carrot that's fresh and local and grown organically or sustainably versus a carrot that's traveled 1,200 miles or more knows the taste is just so different. We thought a cookbook based on what the Berkshires grows and raises would offer one way to support these local farmers who are often hidden from view, who may not intersect with our own lives, but are people who bring us food they lovingly produce and often at a great financial sacrifice. So Lisa grabbed her MacBook Pro, I grabbed a digital recorder, my Nikon, and we traipsed down relatively untraveled dirt roads to interview farmers in their fields while they harvested their watercress or fed their pigs.
We said in the video it was 4 years. I'm telling you, it was more like 7 with little time off. But anyway, first story I want to tell is Hawk Dance Farm. The night before we visited, the owners, Damon and Diane, just finished a dinner of beet pancakes. And beets are just one of 90 crops that they produce. Totally opposite. They have a 3-acre farm, totally opposite of, big ag, where which is based on monoculture and raises soybeans or corn over and over on the exact same soil. They have a whole bunch of recipes that were inspired. Diane and Damon inspired. I mentioned the beet potato pancakes or beet latkes, roasted baby turnips, mashed cauliflower with chives. A whole bunch were inspired by their farm. So their farm's in Hillsdale, and that's about 120 miles from Queens, which is where Damon and Diane started. He was a house painter. She was a vet tech. She owned a pet sitting business, and they were really moved by Back to the Landers, Scott and Helen Nearing, and Elliot Coleman, an organic advocate. And they moved upstate to start Hawk Dance. And when they found the property that they were ultimately going to buy, they saw these 2 hawks, male and female, going up in the air, mating in a dance above the farm. And that was how the farm got its name and why they bought the property. They farm sustainably, which means they don't use chemicals, pesticides, herbicides. They go way beyond USDA's organic certification, caring about the environment. They barely till the soil. No-till farming allows the soil to retain carbon or organic matter, which is better in the soil than in the atmosphere. They're adamant about living to their ideals, being in tune with the earth. They use organic, non-GMO seeds. And as Diane says, we believe in supporting that kind of food because I don't want to be a genetic experiment and I don't want my customers to be either. And then she says, everything we grow is done with such care and such love. We want people to feel that when they eat it, they get that love. We want them to feel when they eat our tomatoes, the joy we feel when we eat them. And frankly, how hard it took us to get those tomatoes to grow to that state. One of their customers wrote on Facebook, "Let me know when you have more cherry tomatoes. Lucy and I ate all ours in like an hour today." Like so many farmers we interviewed, their story isn't an easy one. It took years of farming before they finally made $3,000 in profit after years of farming. They acknowledged they had a romantic vision of farming, which they quickly learned was flawed. It's really hard, Damon says, and we didn't have an emergency fund in case things went wrong. When we met the pair, Damon, who's incredibly resourceful, had jury-rigged an old washing machine and turned it into a commercial vegetable washer and spinner. And when he can, he paints houses off-season, although there's really no off-season anymore, which is a whole different subject. And the 2 of them craft beeswax candles, which they sell at crafts fairs. And like almost all the farmers we interviewed, they do have to work off farm in order to survive. Yet when we said to Diane, "You glad you did this?" Diane said, "Absolutely. We followed our dream. And even if we're not getting rich, at least we can say we've done what we believed in and we're going to continue to do so."
The second story we'd like to tell you is about Moon in the Pond Farm, which is in Sheffield, Mass, and inspired recipes such as farm hash with poached eggs and lamb ragu and a bunch of other great recipes. Farmer Dominic Palumbo hasn't stopped loving the idea of farming ever since he was a 7-year-old cultivating seeds in his basement. In 1991, he began Moon in the Pond, accessed off a dirt road in the southern Berkshire Hills near the Appalachian Trail. In keeping with his continual interest in teaching about farming, through hikers trekking on the trail between Maine and Georgia can check out a day or two of farm life and eat well at the same time. His farm's emphasis is on producing meat from heritage breeds as well as growing heirloom vegetables, which he sells through a CSA, farmers markets, and to restaurants. Heritage breeds are traditional livestock breeds, heirloom veggies, old-time varieties. heritage and heirloom varieties are the antithesis of Big Ag's monoculture of hybridized seeds developed only for their hardiness, including their ability to endure cross-country transportation. Dominic's road to farming, like pretty much every Berkshire farmer we spoke to, has been tough. In 2016, he faced foreclosure, eventually raising money from large and small donations, catalyzed by a fortuitous tweet from Michael Pollan. For Palumbo, each time he sells at a farmer's market, through the taste of a just picked cucumber, for example, he has the opportunity to help others understand the value of buying good, clean food. That includes meat, which doesn't come from what Palumbo calls, quote, a system that is morally, environmentally, and health-wise bankrupt. We're happy to answer questions about this later, but it was striking to us how humanely the farmers we met treated their animals, in great contrast to the conventional agribusiness system. Palumbo was convinced that small farms like his will be the savior of this country's food system, enabling us to be resilient in the face of climate change. Quote, if most of our food comes from the Central Valley of California, he says, you're going to be in trouble when that becomes either impossible to grow there or impossible to get it from there to here. He loves to cook to the tune of 3 meals a day for his staff. His philosophy of food, quote, bread and meat and bad should not be inextricably linked. Red meat, naturally raised, is great for you in balance. Carrots and vegetables are horrible for you if they are raised using bad chemicals and deficient soil.
So 2 more stories, one another farm from Massachusetts, and then a farm from Vermont, and then a little cooking demo, and another video, depending on our time. So this next farm is Woven Roots Farm, Tyringham, Massachusetts. And we tasted a Woven Roots carrot a couple of years ago for the first time, when Jen Salinetti, who's co-owner with her husband Pete of the farm, pulled out a bunch of carrots from the ground, handed us 1 stalk and said, try it. And we remembered that from years ago. Sweet and not like anything that we bought in the supermarket since then. Jen is a Bergen County, New Jersey girl, and husband Pete is a Berkshire guy, and they met at UMass Amherst, where she studied sustainable agriculture and he studied horticulture. And their property, 10 acres of which they cultivate about 1.5 very intensively, is down the road from land that Pete took Jen to see when they came back to this area after college. And Jen remembers saying to Pete, they looked over the Tyringham Valley, which is one of the most beautiful areas, and said, who owns all this land? This is where I want to live someday. And that's where they are. Jen and Pete, like many of the farmers we interviewed, including Damon and Diane, who we spoke about earlier, are known for their commitment to no or low-till farming and barely turning the soil over. The Salinetti's farm completely by hand, again, goes way beyond organic. This is about sustainability. We asked if these features of their farming are part of their sales pitch for Woven Roots, and Pete said, we've never needed to make a sales pitch. I think people can just feel the difference energetically when they eat what we grow and they taste it. Their food is different, he says, because of the care they put in each square foot of soil. And so many other farmers said that, including John and Joy Primer of Pownell, who we'll discuss them in a moment in their farm. So that difference in what a sustainable farm produces is even recognized by kids, including the Salinetti's kids. Kids are not a group you think would be fussy about the taste of produce. And at one point, early on, the family became known for giving their prized carrots. They're diversified, they grow a lot of things, but their carrots are very well known, till they give it to their children's friends as presents. And Jen recalls a birthday party, twin boys, they were getting tons of sports gifts, and all of a sudden he came upon the Salinetti's gift, which was a carrot snack pack. And one of the boys stood up on a picnic table, this is Jen telling us, holds up the carrots and yells, yay, carrots.
And we were recently, over the summer, we did a book signing at the farm at Woven Roots, and we actually met the kid who said yay, carrots, and his mom, who were at the farm, and that was really exciting for us to meet some folks that who've grown up, and we've heard the story for years. So the last story we'll tell is about a farm that's maybe a little more local to Manchester. It's in Manchester, Vermont. It's the Wadstone Farm in Pownell. It's owned by the Primers, John and Joy, absolutely lovely people. And although their farm is a diversified, certified organic farm, They specialize in growing garlic. They taught us a lot about garlic and again, why buying local matters. You won't see the kind of garlic they raise, both the quality and diversity in most large supermarkets. We think of garlic as garlic, but the Primrose website lists 12 varieties they grow, from Carpathian to Georgian Crystal, to name two. Joy tells us her favorite depends upon what she's cooking because they all have different flavor profiles. Some garlic, she says, is better eaten raw and some better cooked. We think of garlic as common, but it turns out it's not an easy vegetable to grow. Its season is long. John and Joy plant it in late October and don't harvest their main crop until mid-July, and then still need to leave it in the greenhouse to dry. They grade their garlic by size and quality, believes theirs has more nutritional value because of the kind of attention they pay to the soil and to the seeds, which are their own. John and Joy are fiercely committed to organic and also operate their farm as sustainably as possible, using solar power, water drawn from a spring below their house, and mainly hand tools to work the land. When we buy from local farmers like Joy and John, we're buying from people who passionately care about their land, the health of the soil, their crops, and the community. While the Primrose eat off their farm, Joy says, quote, "Oh, I don't think we bought a vegetable since we've been here." When they do buy, they're adamant about buying and supporting local purveyors like Cricket Creek Farm in Williamstown, which makes cheese, and High Lawn, the dairy farm in Lee, Mass. Another point to make, in my previous life operating a globally sourced produce distribution company, we bought garlic from California, Mexico, South America, and Asia. Think about the amount of energy we consumed in shipping, flying, and trucking that garlic all over the world, and then reshipping it to supermarkets up and down the East Coast. When you buy garlic from local farmers like Joy and John, you, yourself, are acting sustainably, helping the environment, and buying from people who care about what they offer. As John told us, quote, "This may sound weird, but that the love we put into our work and the care for our land somehow comes out in the produce."
So we talked a little bit about the farmers, and now we're going to speak a little bit about the cookbook, because after all, this is a cookbook. And hopefully after hearing some of these farmer stories, and I know I'm talking to an audience that, already feels very much like this. Rob, you can go back to.
Sure.
Okay, hold on one second.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go. So I know I've spoken a lot about this, but hopefully, just go back a little bit further. Okay. So I'm sorry. So I know that so many of you feel this way, but hopefully from hearing some of these stories, you will realize, of course, even more how important it is to buy local, the taste of the products, the environment. Again, that's the whole nut about sustainability, the soil, the air, land that's safe from development, community that's supported by these farms, even better nutrition, because when things aren't basically schlepped across the country, the nutrition stays in the product a lot longer. And of course, about the animals, which we didn't talk about specifically these farms, although we're happy to do so, because the humane treatment of animals is so important. There was an article in the New York Times today about, I think maybe it's Washington Post, I apologize, about meat purveyors and meat processors in the Midwest, and it was pretty horrifying. I'd like to spend a few moments describing the cookbook's philosophy. Our recipes are purposely accessible, and I'm going to quote Florence Fabricant in the New York Times, who featured the book. Simple. What makes each dish really work, and it's true of cooking, is that if you use the best ingredients, you will make incredible food. And again, choosing local, fresh, sustainable is your first option. Each recipe, as we mentioned, highlights an ingredient grown or it's raised on a particular farm. If they inspired the recipe, the ingredients are not esoteric. But one of our messages is frankly to adventure beyond local carrots, beyond kale, great as they may be. Try the rutabaga. I'm thinking about some of the winter vegetables. Try that rutabaga that's in the produce bin at the supermarket. Hopefully it's local. And like me, you probably walk by it a million times. And again, this is the perfect time during the winter to try some of this. And hopefully you will see local in the supermarkets. Again, look for root vegetables. Another cookbook message, be flexible. So Bridget Spann, who's one of the owners of Caretaker in Williamstown, Massachusetts, when we spoke to her, said, be open to making substitutions. And she told us this story where she uses recipes just as a framework, which many of us do. And then she expands off of them, depending what she has available on her farm. So she told us that there was a moosewood chili recipe that she really loved. And she happened to have a ton of kohlrabi sitting around. That's one of those other vegetables that we tend not to use so often, but it's a great vegetable. And she went online and looked to see if anybody had stuck kohlrabi in chili, and guess what? She found that in fact they did. And that inspired our recipe, which is a great winter recipe for bean chili. But if you can't find kohlrabi, then you can use broccoli stems, and frankly, a whole lot else, not to worry. We're going to switch to let's see, looking at our time, and we can do it, a short video, which talks about pizza recipe from her book. And while it's based on summer ingredients, the point of this video is twofold. One is that you can create the best food from using fresh ingredients, and you'll see that from the video. And frankly, that you can change up a recipe like the one we're showing you and have it come out terrifically just by using whatever's available in season. So, again, put whatever toppings you want on your pizza, but fresh and local. Want to show it?
Yeah, and we're going to share the video, and just bear with me, I'm sorry. There we go.
Hi, I'm Elisa Spungen Bildner, and I'm the author with my husband Rob Bildner, and in collaboration with Chef Brian Albert, of the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook, which has 125 recipes inspired by the farms of the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts, New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. I'm here with my son Rafi Bildner, who's a master pizza chef, and who inspired us to write this book because of his foray into farming a number of years ago.
Yeah, so thanks, Mom. We're going to, it's an honor to be here with my mother and the author of this co-author of this amazing book. We're going to show a simple pizza recipe from the book that uses the bounty of the summer growing season here in New England. We just picked up the zucchini from Woven Roots Farm from our CSA, a farm featured in their book. We have these beautiful local cherry tomatoes, some red onions, some local basil, dairy. This is a unbelievably rich agricultural area, and a pizza is a perfect canvas for that that beautiful farm bounty. So I'm going to it's a simple zucchini and cherry tomato pizza. I'm going to throw some cherry tomatoes, some sliced red onion, some zucchini, a little olive oil in a bowl here just to mix up, a little salt, some ground black pepper, and pizzas are simple. Don't go crazy here. We want to literally just let the ingredients each sing for themselves on the pizza, so we don't need to have an overly complicated pizza. And I think your recipe in this book really just does that.
Super simple.
Super simple, and we're going to use a dough that I made. I do a sourdough crust. You can go to your local pizzeria to get dough if you're not comfortable making it at home. We have an easy recipe in the book, but I stretch this in a lot of flour here. We want to make sure that pizza is sliding around a lot. That's where people get into trouble making pizzas at home. And I'm going to top this with these ingredients that we just tossed in the bowl, some local ricotta, mozzarella from a farm just to the north of us here, and we want every ingredient going onto the pizza now to be perfectly spiced and ready to go. We don't want to be layering so many different complicated ingredients. We want to keep this really simple. So I'm going to switch spots with you, Mom.
Sure.
One home pizza making tip I'll give is we want to let gravity do the work when we're stretching that out. As you said, as you saw, I just let the dough fall nicely and stretch itself. And I'm going to get this in the oven with a little ricotta, mozzarella, as I said. Throw these ingredients on and just put them all over the pizza. This beautiful local zucchini, the cherry tomatoes, and local mozzarella, and pop it in the oven. And Mom, while I'm having it in the oven, you want to talk a little bit more about why you wrote the book?
Sure. So we wrote the book because we wanted to show that you can have the most extraordinary food if you use really fresh, preferably from local sustainable farms, which is what our book, our recipes are inspired by. I'm just going to hold up just so you can see. This is another recipe from our book.
Yeah, I can hold it up
You
closer.
Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Gorgeous.
This is a chilled melon and mint soup. It takes maybe 15 minutes to make, 20 minutes to make.
I'll say with some local wildflowers, edible
Absolutely.
wildflowers on the rim here.
And again, our idea was to create or have accessible recipes that, again, they shine because of the ingredients. Using when you can, fresh and local. And also, in doing this book, we wanted to tell the story of the farms that inspired the recipes, but the farmers that we met in our journey around this area, learning what this area produces, and wanted to show you how hard they work, how extraordinary things they do to preserve the environment, and at the same time giving us the most incredible bounty of beautiful food.
And the recipes are very easy. I mean,
For the most part, there's maybe one or two that are a little harder.
yeah, a pizza is one of the more complicated ones, but again, you can buy dough from a local pizzeria if you don't want to make dough at home. And what I'm doing now is, obviously we have this gorgeous wood-fired oven behind us, but you could obviously use a pizza stone at your home oven. You could use a baking sheet if you don't have a pizza stone. And I'm just turning this pizza a little bit just to give it even coloration on all sides. This is cooking much quicker than it would in your home oven because it's at 800 degrees and it's a wood-fired oven. And it's just about out. But I want to encourage you to think of making a pizza, as you'll see when this comes out. We're not flattening the dough. We're not rolling the dough. We're just moving the air around from the side, from the middle of the crust to the outside. And that's how you get these gorgeous, gorgeous, beautiful crusts that are really airy. And the cornicione, the crown of the pizza, as we call it, is beautiful. So we're going to dig into this.
Absolutely.
And any final words, Mom, that you want to say
Sure.
about?
I'm going to just suggest that if you want to find out more about the cookbook and more about how you can produce these extraordinary recipes and about farmers' lives, check our website, berkshiresandbeyond.com. We hope to see you there.
And we will cut this up and enjoy a beautiful bite of this cherry tomato and zucchini pizza inspired by the local farms in this agriculturally rich region.
Right.
So
This is, I should say, inspired by Berkshire Bounty Farm, one of the most beautiful farms in the area. Very small, prolific.
awesome. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're now going to switch to a little food demo and take it away. Let's see.
Okay, you switch me over?
Yeah.
So while Rob is doing that, I'm just going to mention that we think about, we can't buy local now. We think that it's impossible to do because it's the winter. But honestly, farmers, right, I was speaking to them today, they're all, I can't say all, but most producing products as we speak. Many of them have really 9 to 12 month operations. And one of the ways that you can even get ingredients like some of the ones used on the pizza, like tomatoes, that clearly aren't grown in the ground right now, but could be grown in greenhouses or can be grown in urban farms. And I very often buy tomatoes from urban farms, as well as lettuces. So I mention this because there's all kinds of farming, and again, the idea is to buy local and not to buy from across the world. So just a few moments here. So I'm going to just show you. This is a dairy recipe. You can easily get this from a local dairy. It's a chocolate ganache. Robin's back on the video. Okay. It's a chocolate ganache. Very briefly, here's how it's made. It takes some local dairy, and I don't know if you can see, this is from Highland Farm, which is a dairy in Lee, Massachusetts that we mentioned. I boiled some cream with a little bit of vanilla, organic vanilla. And I'm just going to mention a few things about these ingredients. I use local dairy because it's pasteurized, not ultra pasteurized cream. It retains flavor, retains better bacteria than ultra pasteurized, which is the normal commercial variety you can see in supermarkets. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to buy local in terms of dairy. I also use I use chocolate chips, and I pour the boiled cream and vanilla over chocolate chips. And I happen to use ones that have stevia, so I don't use sugar. This recipe has absolutely no sugar in it if you use that, but you can see that there are other chocolate chips that you can use. And here's one here, Tart. Rob, wait a second, see.
You look at the camera.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So on chocolate chips, you can use, they're dark chocolate chips. You can use any kind you want. You can use chocolate bars. I don't frankly find it makes that much of a difference, although some people really prefer chocolate bars. But you want something with a minimum, if it's dark chocolate, of it's got to be 35% cocoa solids. And so that's what I use. And again, so this is the sugarless dessert. I pour the cream or the chocolate, the cream and the vanilla over the chocolate, melts the chocolate. I add a little bit of organic blueberries, which are here. These are not local, they're Maine, but okay, I consider that local enough. They're organic wild blueberries, dried, and put them in a baking dish, which I have here. I prep the baking dish by putting parchment on the bottom so that I can easily lift out the product after it's cold, which after I do this, I put it in the pan, put it in the refrigerator for about an hour. It gets cold, it gets solid. Don't put it in the freezer. It doesn't work that way for ganache. And I have a dish that literally is a fantastic dessert that takes about 15 minutes. But the key to it, to me, is using the local dairy. I can't emphasize that enough. I have a few other things I want to show you that I have out here. They won't show you in terms of making, but I'll just mention because they're all things that can be made during the winter, no problem. So one of the things I have here are the Beet Pancakes, which I mentioned were inspired by Hawk Dance Farm. Beet Pancakes. I also have Rutabaga Pancakes here. Sometimes people might call them latkes. Often they're done usually with potatoes, but these are done with other vegetables that are really easy to find locally during the winter. I mentioned some other things I have here that are also in the cookbook. Here is an apple bread. I happen to have in my refrigerator right now, because I went apple picking a couple months ago, bags, literally bags left of local apples. And I use them for months to make applesauce, which I also have here. Some fresh local applesauce, just made with a little bit of cinnamon and nutmeg, no sugar. And I also have some brownies here, which is sort of funny, but again, using local dairy, inspired by a farm called Hawthorne Valley Farm, which is in New York. And they're called camp brownies, some brownies that they created a recipe for based on what they do in their camps, their summer camps, which they're known for. So here's a bunch of things. Let me move over back to where I was before. Happy to answer any questions about the cookbook or about the farmers.
Yeah, so before we get to questions, I did want to, I did want to speak a little bit about buying local and some of the recipes in our book, which maybe you want to talk about some of the recipes, which are.
Yeah, I'm just going to mention again, people say, well, you're talking about farm to table, that's just summer. Again, I can't emphasize how much it's not just summer. So I mentioned that I'd spoken to farmers all day today for an article I'm writing on farming now and farming coming into the spring. And the farmers I spoke to, all of whom are still selling what they're growing or raising. And it's not just the dairy farmers, and it's not just the meat farmers who are clearly year round. There are vegetable farmers as well. And it takes a little bit of work to find this and maybe contacting the farmers, but please do, Ralph, we'll speak about that in a little bit.
But I like
recipes, yeah. So I just mentioned just a few off the top of my head. So kale sausage and white bean soup, great winter recipe. Bean soup with smoked ham hock, burnt carrots. I showed you the potato pancakes before. Number of chilies. I've got alagobi, which is an Indian-inspired dish made with chicken. Desserts, a whole bunch of quick breads, including parsnip, carrot, pumpkin, and I showed you apple bread. There's plenty to do in the winter.
And also sandwiches. We have wonderful 2 cheese grilled cheese inspired by our friends at Cricket Creek and a tempeh Reuben. So there are lots of winter recipes. So now I just would like to address before questions ways you can increase your buying local now, even in the dead of winter. So we mentioned the Primrose of Wildstone Farm. They're happy to sell you some of their products now. They're selling products now. You can also find locally grown foods by going to a website, farmstanding.com. You enter your location. I entered Manchester, Vermont, for example. It gave me many places where you can buy local now, including a farm 15 miles away, which is Mighty Food Farms, a farm we wrote about in our book. And they have a winter CSA going on. They sell their products, such as winter spinach and kale, kimchi, sauerkraut, lots of storage crops, carrots, leeks, kohlrabi, turnips, radishes, and more. There's another website we recommend, localharvest.org. Again, enter your location, and it tells you where you can buy local. And it connected me to another one of the farms we wrote about, Square Roots Farm in Lanesboro, Mass., which sells meat and eggs year-round. Our Facebook, Instagram, and website page, we are currently in the process of updating it. It's got a lot of information about where you can buy local now and why. And I think, Elisa, you want to interject with some thoughts about your conversations today with local farmers.
I can, but I will also say that for those people who are in New York State, particularly around the Saratoga Springs store, again, same thing. You can find local farms, there just as well. No problem. The one thing I'll say about the farmers who spoke today, the ones who are not selling to restaurants are doing really well in that they have a crush of business, but it's a little cyclical depending on how people feel about the pandemic. But I urge you not to sort of write them off, to to go find them, check out how you can get their goods, because they are still selling, they are still growing, they are still raising. And what's really important, and this is true post-pandemic, this is a message they really told me, they hope that people realize the virtues of buying what they sell, not just now because, you know, there's sometimes more limited supply, things like that, but really because it's really the great way to eat and to purchase food.
And to help sustain them. So we hope that if you have any questions, you can contact us at berkshiresandbeyond.com, and you go to our Facebook or Instagram, the website for info. And now we're happy to answer your questions, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks so much, Rob. I'm really hungry and I want to make a pizza. That was great. I love the videos. There's a question to start us off from Carrie. She asks, which are your favorite recipes in the book, and are there any Vermont farmers included?
Well, if it's the Carrie I'm thinking of, hi Carrie.
Yes.
Great to have you on. You're truly a trooper. I'm sorry. So you want your favorite recipes?
Well, in the Vermont. Well, yes, Vermont. So Vermont farmers, as we said, Wildstone, primers, the Mighty Foods Farm, which is in Shaftesbury, which is a pretty impressive farm with basically many varieties of CSAs almost year round. They're very impressive farmer.
They inspired the Farm Bounty salad.
Yeah, many of our great recipes.
Yeah.
You want to talk about favorite recipes? Go ahead.
Sure. So, okay, favorite recipes. I'll tell you something I made this week. It was a mushroom stew. We also have recipes inspired by restaurants, and this was inspired by Prairie Whale, which is in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And it makes use of some local shiitake mushrooms that are grown on logs in a farm in I think Sandusfield. Anyway, it's a wonderful winter recipe. I use many different varieties of mushrooms, and I just happen to have made it this week. So that's a good example.
And one of mine, which Elisa will say, it is a lot of work. Our recipes are simple,
right?
But it is absolutely fabulous and lasts for a long time. It's confetti vegetable and goat cheese lasagna. It's amazing. It's check out the recipe in our book. It's hearty. It's delicious. It's a crowd pleaser. That's definitely a favorite of mine.
Oh, the exact name of the recipe that I mentioned before is mushroom ragu over pasta, rice, or polenta. I also do a whole bunch of stir fries now, some of which were in the book. One inspired by Berkshire Bounty, which I think you mentioned. Again, you can sub in and out whatever ingredients you want.
We mentioned for now in the winter the kale sausage and white bean soup. It's a great recipe. Now, we're vegetarians and a vegan, but our book is filled with meat recipes because it represents what the Berkshires grows and raises. This recipe is both for meat eaters because you use sausage, or you can veganize or vegetarianize it with vegan sausage. It's a really delicious, hearty soup.
And I should mention, depending on one's eating style or whatever, many of the recipes, if not most, we give vegetarian or vegan options if they are meat recipes. And I will just have to say, because we sort of alluded to this a number of times on the issue of meat. We personally are not meat eaters, so those recipes were developed by Brian and worked on by some professional. We've used professional recipe testers who did a fabulous job. But the one thing I would say is that if I were a meat eater, I would be buying the food that these farmers raise, because each one of them, the way they treat their animals is so heartwarming. It's so unlike anything that you can possibly imagine or that you've read about that goes on these, in commercial, feedlots. It would be very difficult for me personally to eat meat from commercial versus local.
And one of our
raisers.
farmers is in actually Williamstown, not too far certainly from Manchester. Kim Wells, East Mountain Farm. I have a photo in our book, and I mentioned I took the photos. It's one of my favorites.
It
was in the video. Kim sitting on a stump, gazing with great love for his pigs, who are gazing back at him. He is an extraordinary. He's actually a Williams grad, and just treats. But we have many stories about our meat farmers in the book.
I'm thinking Climbing Tree Farm in New York.
In New York, New York State.
They have thought so long and hard about what it means to be a meat farmer.
But back to recipes, desserts. We have great desserts. We've got some really scrumptious. We mentioned some of the parsnip, pumpkin, and apple breads. Some fantastic pies. If there's a maple cheesecake, that's really to die for. So there's some really yummy, and the ganache, of course, but recipes for all season.
Pumpkin creme brulee.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to mention one summer one because I think I made it all summer long, because there's right behind us farm, Pick Your Own Blueberry, organic blueberry farm, glazed blueberry lemon
Yeah.
bread. And actually I have in my freezer bags of frozen
But
blueberries.
But again, the book is for all seasons. Yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in about the meat farmers. I've heard so many say before that something of the equivalent of they want their pigs to, or their animals to have just a great life and only have like one bad day, which I think is funny. But I had another question for you. The
Sure.
farmstanding.com you mentioned and the other website, is that for the entire nation or just in this region?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is for the entire nation. And so you literally, you just put in, your location. So if you're traveling wherever you are, and it will give you local farmers in the vicinity of wherever you happen to be. Now it's a broad range. I mean, I think they go maybe 100 miles or so from where you are. But I just, for kicks, I put in Manchester, and it picked up many of our local farms that we wrote about in the book. The wonderful, as we said at the beginning of our presentation, what's been very gratifying to us to find that this message about buying local resonates all across the country. We've done these book talks by now for TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, literally all across the country, even in the Midwest, like the heartland of monoculture, big ag, and our message is resonating. They're folks who really buy sustainable, organic. They're farmers who are, plugging away, who really care, who really see themselves as, I don't know, they're trying to do something better to help, save the planet, to be honest. So it's been very inspiring. Yeah.
I'll mention one more thing too, which is local organizations that support farmers. And in our area, it's Berkshire grown. Particularly, there are a bunch of organizations that support farmers, but that one, they have a full directory of farms in the area, CISA in the Pioneer Valley. And again, wherever you are, there's generally an organization that exists to support farmers. So please check them out as well.
And departments of agriculture too. I know, and foundations, private groups are really trying to help these local farmers.
What was the second website you mentioned besides farmstanding.com?
Yeah, it's localharvest.org, and it's farmstanding.com. Farmstanding.com.
Which is a new one.
Yeah.
So.
Local harvest, and farmstanding.com.
Yeah.
Great. And I've got a question for you, Rob. You had talked about, mentioned in passing how you were working with food distribution from across the world, and then now you're talking about hyper local. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey there?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and it has been quite a journey. So I started in the early '80s. It began as a specialty produce, a specialty food importation and distribution company, and we actually were one of the first distributors of organic foods at the time. I actually served on the New Jersey Organic Certification Board, and grew that business. And we brought in basically 24/7 or throughout the year, probably thousands of perishable food products, including every imaginable type of produce. And we literally imported apple pears from Japan and tomatoes from Israel. And we had this, I had a very large refrigerated warehouse. I had trucks lined up every day coming from California. So I really lived that. At the time, we were satisfying the consumer's demand to have fresh foods year round. But the truth is, as I came to this epiphany, that it's not the way to go. It's not the way to go for a planet. It's not the way to go for healthy eating, because these foods literally were trucked across country, thousands of miles, sitting in these refrigerated trailers, just burning up energy that's just tons, of energy. And for what? So we have, a certain, fruit year round, and flying fruit from Chile and all over the world. So yeah, it was an epiphany for me to recognize the importance of respecting seasonality for all the good reasons. And frankly, I traveled the world visiting farms, and a lot of our farmers, the farmers we worked with, were, many of them were organic farmers. They did care about the environment, but the truth is many of them were very large. And frankly, in retrospect, I think that, as I said, we were using up too much energy and not probably doing the right thing. It's the conventional food business, that system that we operate in the United States, where we're getting all this cheap, generally not nutritious food trucked all over, filling up the fast food pipeline, and it's just not the way to go. So anyway, I can definitely happy to talk about that at any point. It really informed my understanding of why local food is so important.
I just want to mention one thing, because Rachel, I see that you wrote in the chat about farmers markets around Saratoga. I just want to double check. Is Space City Farmers Market, is that the one in Troy? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Spa City Farmers Market is in Saratoga also. That's the Sunday Farmers Market.
Okay, because there's also one that a number of our farmers I know are at in Troy, New York as well. So I guess it's the same group or whatever. So I just want to mention that.
Yeah, that's also a wonderful one.
Yeah, there are Winters Farmers Markets. And again, I think they're the ones that we've seen are being done really carefully. And farmers, again, are depending on them hugely.
Just going back to your question, and I don't want to take up too much time, but when I sat on the organic certification board, the organic certifications are based on a very, in some ways, kind of an arbitrary principle. It's a naturally occurring chemical. It's okay if it's, synthetic, it's not. And I remember reviewing all these lists of chemicals that we would say, for certification were okay or not. And it always struck me that it was in some ways a very arbitrary designation, which is why I think sustainable local is just so much more important.
But I'm glad you said that, Rob, because people sometimes don't fully understand what organic is. But I want to emphasize that I would take organic certified
absolutely
a million times
over conventional,
sure. With not even a question.
Yeah.
I mean, and yes, we get into the issue sometimes of cost, because sometimes, not all the time, it's a higher cost, and we can certainly address that as well if you'd like. But I want people to realize that organic.
Yeah, totally.
If it's
there's no question. I just think we've come a long way.
Many certified organic farmers are sustainable as well, even if it's not required by the organic certification designations.
I don't know if you have more questions or what the time is, but
yeah, we've got a little bit more time, and I was going to say, can you tell us a little bit about the recipe testing process for making this?
It's actually very relevant, because our primary recipe tester was from Burlington, Vermont. So the book has origins in Vermont. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that. So the way we started, I had this very delusional idea, although we've written before, this was our first cookbook, this delusional idea that we would just use our many friends who raised their hand and said, I really want to test your recipes. And many of them did, and they were wonderful and did it. But we realized very quickly that that was not the way to find recipes or create recipes that were absolutely foolproof, because everybody has different standards, different ways of doing their recipes, and you take a collection of people testing recipes without being standardized, that's really tough. So we hired a recipe tester in Burlington who worked with a colleague. So that was two of them, plus a recipe tester who's also a friend, but professional here in the Berkshires. And they tested each recipe so that recipes were done also by friends and then also done by me and whatever. So they were tested many times over, but I wanted to have a certain baseline testers who would say, yes, this works, it doesn't work, this is what we have to do, play with, etc. There's nothing more frustrating, and I'm sure people who are on this call have had this experience of opening a cookbook, doing a recipe, and finding it really doesn't work, or that there's a mistake, which it's possible in an editing process. Yes, that could happen because there's so many edited versions of a book. But that being said, there are times that recipes just really aren't tested. And a famous one that I'll just mention is a cookbook in New York of a restaurant that's extraordinarily well known, won't mention it. I used the cookbook, I've used it many times, and there was a recipe that had called for 1 tablespoon of salt And I thought, "Oh, that is really weird. I mean, that's enough salt to sort of push everybody over." But I did it thinking, of course, it's in a cookbook. That must be right. Well, needless to say, it was wrong, and I had to throw out the whole thing. Of course, it should have been 1 teaspoon of salt. So to me, that recipe testing is a very honorable and honor to me profession, because you need it.
And we had many experiences. It was a very rigorous process for our book. We're both lawyers by training, so we know what it is to proofread. We're really fanatical about getting it right. But we and Brian is a fabulous cook, a chef. But there were many times as we went through our recipes that we just couldn't understand why a certain recipe wasn't coming out right. And one of our recipes is actually, I think, it's the Indian pudding story, when we had a little problem where the amount of molasses, I think, there was a significant mistake. So it was just
in the editing process.
It was too gooey. It wasn't right. And we realized there was a problem in the measure. Just, and it took a while of testing, but we got it right. But it's probably the most important part of, making a cookbook work.
Well, Rob and Elisa, thank you so much. We are just about out of time. I think there's one last question in the chat from Cheryl, and she's just asking if perhaps you could please name the farms and their locations that you spoke of at the start of the session.
Well, the ones we spoke of at the start of the session. I think we spoke of the ones I talked to today, maybe. I talked about Wildstone, which is the one in Pownell.
Oh, well,
I spoke about, the ones in Moon in the Pond in Sheffield, Massachusetts.
Moon in the Pond, Hawk Dance Farm in Hillsdale, New York.
Hillsdale, New York. What other ones did we speak about today? Because we trade off all the time.
I mean, to be honest, the best way to give this information, if you go on our website, berkshiresandbeyond.com, we have a little heading for farms. And we actually have a list of all the farms that we write about, with their contact information, and so that's probably the best way. But the farms that we spoke about, I think, are the ones that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I think there was another one we spoke about as well. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Woven Roots we spoke about.
Woven Roots Farm in Tyringham, Mass. Yeah.
Anyway, feel free to get in touch with us. Happy to answer any further questions. And can't thank you guys enough.
We're really honored to
keep up the great bookstore.
Speak for Northshire. I can't wait to come in and look for books in person sooner.
We were in person.
Well, we did go in person, actually.
Not that long ago. You were there.
We'll be back.
Thanks so much.
The very best way to find out about all the farms is, of course, by buying a copy of the Berkshires Farm Table Cookbook. Rob, Elisa, thank you so much. This has been lovely.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor.
And Rachel, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Rob and Elisa. And have
Stay
a great
well.
night, everyone.
Stay healthy and happy cooking. Bon appetit. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.